Borderlands 4 yesterday. I am very mixed on it. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, you know, a lot of people have been complaining about the performance and the graphics and how that's been bad. I really didn't have any issues with it. I don't have the best PC in the world. I did upgrade recently, but it's still not great. However, I was generally able to run it on low, medium settings without too many issues. I did see some bugs. I did see some visual glitches, things like that, but it generally ran smoothly, if not perfectly. So, worked fine for me, and obviously also they made some very quick patches to improve performance, which helped out with me a bit as well. However, I think also that the general gameplay has been pretty good. And by the way, obviously you're seeing some video that I took of me playing it. You may be able to see some of these issues yourself. But this is, just basically some low mid-level play, looks good, fine, etc. I will say that the gameplay itself feels really good. There were some innovations on the formula, there were some improvements that they made compared to the previous games that felt really good. I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed the gunplay. I would say that that was probably the strongest element of the game, is just how fluid it felt. Really good, also very interesting guns. So obviously, for those of you who may not know, Borderlands is, kind of a parody sci-fi looter shooter sort of thing. So it has very heavy RPG elements, but it also has, lots and lots of guns, and a lot of the guns have, semi-random properties applied to them. And so a lot of these guns are very silly. They are intentionally designed with very weird firing modes that are unusual. And in particular, I had some pretty cool guns drop in my playthrough. I really liked some things where it was like, it was like a sniper rifle that, fires little dots that, stick to an enemy and then, deal more damage over time. That kind of stuff is cool. And I think that they definitely expanded a lot on sort of just the range of the different kinds of weapons compared to prior games. So all of that is great. However, there are some issues that I have with this game that are just above and beyond the performance issues that everyone is complaining about. And I will say in particular that the first one is the plot. I would say this is probably the weakest plot of all of the games. The Borderlands series has always been a very parody, not very serious sort of game series. The game always revolves around, okay, you go to a planet, there's this alien vault on the planet, you're a vault hunter, you're trying to get to the vault because it's supposed to have all kinds of cool treasure in it, and then, you fight some bad guys along the way, you get to open the vault at the end, cool, that's the whole premise. All of the games have relied very heavily on comedy, on humor, and they've also often featured very strong characters. So oftentimes these characters are, silly, goofy parody characters. Probably the most well-known is Handsome Jack, who is the antagonist in Borderlands 2 and some of the other games, and who's kind of this wise-talking, sarcastic guy who's constantly just doing weird non-sequiturs, and he's kind of silly and evil. And I think that one thing that's also happened over the years is that basically, Borderlands 1 was good, Borderlands 2 was good. Around Borderlands 3 and the pre-sequel, which were the next games in the series, people felt that it kind of started to get a little tiring. They felt that the comedy was starting to get a bit dated, starting to get a bit cringe. And, I mean, it's true. Definitely, 100%. I go back and play these games, and I don't have, it's like, oh my god, this is, stuff that maybe resonated to me a little bit when I was a teenager or in my 20s. Now that I'm in my 30s, I'm like, oh, this is all cringe, it's all gross, it's all weird. However, I think that what they did in Borderlands 4 was they really tried to step that back, right? So they said, okay, we're not, it's still going to be comedy, it's still going to be parody, but it's not going to lean too heavily on it. We're not going to lean too much into references that'll get dated. We're not going to lean too much into comedy that'll be cringe later. And the end result is that I would say that the game is not really funny at all, in any real sense. I did not laugh. I did not find anything very funny. I would say that I had to play about 5 or 10 hours into the game before I saw something that I would, be able to very generously call a joke. There just really wasn't much of any of it. It took a very long time to get to it. And the other thing also is that, again, Borderlands has been really reliant on really strong characters. And, you know, you've always been able to memorize these games by just these very standout characters. I could, like, it's like this game, the characters in this game are, like, so one-dimensional, it's like, yeah, whatever, who cares? Like, basically, it's like, okay, there's a guy who rescues you and dies, there's a guy who likes protein shakes, I guess, there's a scientist, there's a bunch of bad guys, you don't really know what most of their motivations are, really. The main bad guy is, like, just kind of a bad guy, like, they don't really explore him very well in the plot, and, like, it's all just, like, mush. Like, it doesn't really make a good plot. And so it, like, tries to be a lot more serious, but it doesn't really hold up as a serious plot either. Because the plot has all these moments where you kind of think that there'll be sort of, like, rising tension or consequences for your actions in the game, and basically none of that happens. Obviously, spoilers a little bit if you haven't played the game through yet. You know, basically in the beginning, it's like, okay, a guy saves your life, and then he gets captured and dies, and then, you know, basically there's a point where you break into a military base, and you're told basically, like, okay, because you did this, they're sending a warship over to, you know, the Resistance hideout or whatever, where all your friends are, and they're going to get there before you, and they have some hyper powerful new weapon that they have, you know, that the rebels have no counter for, and so they're going to get there first. And so in your head that means, ah, crap, like, they're screwed, there's nothing you can do, you're getting there as fast as you can to try and maybe save some people, and basically you get there and nobody important dies. Like, nothing seriously bad happens, it's just like, oh great, like, we saved the day, nothing bad happened. There's another point where a guy is like, okay, there's a bomb, and I'm gonna, like, sacrifice myself to save you, and then they're like, oh yeah, actually we just teleported him out at the last second, so it's fine, he's fine, nobody died. They do this whole thing where they're like, oh, the guy that you thought died earlier on in the plot, actually he came back to life, or, you know, actually he didn't die in the first place, they just kind of kidnapped him and made him, you know, put him through a bunch of experiments. And so now he's kind of gone insane, and sort of he's evil, and so you have to fight him. And they also make that seem like that's going to be a thing where, oh, like, there's going to be bad things that happen because, you know, this guy got tortured and became, like, you know, an evil wizard, essentially. And again, he doesn't do anything. Nothing happens. Like, none of, you know, no consequences to that plot line either. There's just so many things in this game where, like, there's plot lines, and then it's just like, oh, yeah, actually nothing happened. Well, great. What was the point of this? Why are you setting this up if it's just going to be like, oh yeah, nothing happened. There's no, you know, there's no complication. There's no consequences. It's all very bizarre. And I think that, you know, the plot doesn't have to be super great, but it's like you could have had a funny plot, or you could have had a very serious plot that was well written, and you didn't really have either. You had a plot that was kind of serious, but not well written, and not very funny, and I would say it's probably the weakest of the Borderlands plots because it's so incoherent in that way. I think also it's really funny how they have this character, Claptrap, which is basically like this annoying robot sidekick. He's kind of like the comedy foil for the series. He's been around since the first game. He's one of the game's most enduring characters. And he's been in basically every Borderlands game. And it's very interesting because he used to be kind of like the, you know, it's like everybody loves Claptrap. You know, like, he's the, you know, he's the guy. And to be fair, like, his name is a poorly dated joke, you know, at this point. Like, not to get too woke, but it's, you know, it's an insensitive joke. And on top of all of that, the game is very funny because they do bring Claptrap back in this game. But they also dunk on him for that. Like, they're like, oh, like, that guy's annoying, we don't want to deal with him. And so they, like, shove him to the side, you barely interact with him in the game, and you don't have to do, you know, much of anything to do with him. So, like, you know, that's fine, you know, whatever. But, it is kind of funny. It does say, I think, a lot about how the series is trying to mature and evolve. And I do think it's interesting, because I think that they could try to do more serious plots in the future, and I think that they could pull it off, but I don't think that they're pulling it off right now. And so it's in this weird in-between spot where again, it's like halfway between a serious plot and a comedic plot, and it's not really pulling off either of them. Next thing I want to emphasize is the fact that the game is open world. It's the first game that's truly open world, where all of the prior Borderlands games were, basically segmented. You had specific zones that you load into, and then you go to the end of one zone to load into another zone, and so on. Which, I mean, it doesn't necessarily obviously change the moment-to-moment gameplay a lot, because there's still a lot in terms of, okay, you've got vehicles to get around quickly, and you can teleport from one place to another if you need to, and, you fight enemies, and you kind of have different ways to approach, different encounters, because, you might approach it from this side of the map or this side of the map or whatever. All of that is roughly the same. However, I will say that it really caused the game to sacrifice a lot of opportunities for cinematic sort of levels. One thing that is very cool about, a sort of structured game, it's not just open world, is that you have the ability to create these cinematic moments where you go, oh, like, we can basically force this player to go through this section of the map to get through this other section of the map. And what that means is you can really create these very tailored experiences where it's like, hey, I know that this person is going to go this way, and so I can show them this really cool, impressive thing, and I know that they're going to see it because they're going to be walking this way, and it's going to be, facing them and so on, right? You don't have a lot of those in this game. They don't really do a lot of that. Like, they kind of, obviously, some of, like, the boss levels, they kind of actually force you into a kind of a dungeon, which is a specific instance that's separate from the world map. And so in those cases, you do sometimes get some of that. But I would say that a lot of the game's, impressiveness in level design is, I mean, it's not as good. I don't like it as much personally. I mean, obviously, some people might prefer the open world approach. I just generally don't. However, I think the thing that I had the most issue with was simply the difficulty. So, I mean, Borderlands has always been somewhat difficult. It's always been a game series where they scaled the difficulty based on your current level. So obviously, it's not really much point in leveling up a lot of the time. It's just going to mean that you're sort of getting into the harder end of the balance where things are tougher and your character has to be more optimized in order to survive. But it's also been a game that's really co-op forward, and that's why I got into it when I was much younger, was I was like playing it with my friends because they were really into it. And, you can play co-op, and that's fun. You can resurrect your friends. It makes the game a lot easier. Particularly, there are a lot of levels where, just like the difficulty level is such that it'll be a lot easier if you're playing with friends. That said, obviously, I was playing it solo this time, and I found the scaling extremely inconsistent. Because, again, everything in the game is scaled based on your current level. And what that means is basically it's like, hey, most of the time you'll be fighting enemies that are the same level as you, and that means they're not too much of a challenge, but not a cakewalk either. And then obviously sometimes they'll throw in enemies a few levels below you so that it's easy, or a few levels above you so that it's hard. And in particular, what I would find is that as I got up to the later levels of the game, as I got up to like level 25, 30 and beyond, basically, anytime you would encounter enemies that were scaled to be a higher level than you, it would be punishingly difficult to get through them. And I'm going to put up some video now, some different gameplay video of what it looks like when I'm playing compared to what it was looking like when I was playing earlier. And just how different the experience is. When you are fighting enemies that are a few levels higher than you at higher difficulty levels, you are talking like, okay, I've got character that's roughly optimized, or at least that's not bad. I've got guns that are, maybe not perfect, but are at least level appropriate and are sort of the best guns available to me. And I will go into combat and I'll have to empty like 5 or 10 whole clips of ammo into an enemy just to kill it. And like, in the meantime, the enemy can kill me in like 2 or 3 hits. Like, genuinely, just like an absurd imbalance there where it's so easy to die. And then you put like 10 of those enemies in a room and it becomes impossible. And at that point also, like, you have to rely on just like the cheapest, like most overpowered stuff that you can. You have to look for the most broken way to build your character so that you can have a chance to actually be able to survive. I ended up doing this Frost build where the whole thing is that basically you get shield back whenever you deal damage with ordnance damage. And ordnance damage includes this special ability that you have, which is this melee attack. And so essentially, you can survive forever as long as you can keep hitting with your melee attack. Well, great. That just meant that all I would do is just spam my melee attack repeatedly to try and survive, and then even then sometimes I would die, and that sucked. Like, it's not a good gameplay experience when it's basically just like, okay, you have to spam one ability over and over again and hope that you survive. And the other issue is that it's, again, just very inconsistent. So you take something where, like, the last few levels of the game, it's like, hey, I'm fighting enemies 5 levels above me. They're super hard. And then suddenly I get a segment where they're the same level as me, and it's, you know, a cakewalk in comparison. And then once again, it's like, oh, now we're right back to the hard enemies, and now we're right back to the easy enemies. And there doesn't seem to be any reason for it. It's like, why did you structure it this way? Why, you know, like, why am I seeing this back and forth? And in particular, I would say that the final boss of the game was genuinely much easier than any of the stuff that led up to it. Like, I was dying nonstop on a lot of these just basic enemy groups on the lead up to the final boss. I get to the final boss. It took me 2 tries to beat him, and the only reason I died the first time is that I accidentally wasn't looking where I was going and fell off the edge of the map and died that way. So, of course, I could not get a victory, and it wasn't really the boss. I mean, it's not like the boss really killed me. It was just me. So, like, I think that that's the biggest issue. And, like, I looked this up. I did see a lot of other people complaining about the difficulty. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I mean, I also see people who are like, oh, I've built this crazy broken build and everything is super easy. And, like, yeah, that's true, but, like, I don't think it's a good gameplay experience. I don't think that you need to be a theory crafter, somebody who min-maxes every single little point of damage or whatever, to enjoy a game. Like, right? Like, yes, I enjoy a game where you can do that, and you can make the gameplay trivial or whatever, by just building the perfect character. That's great. But I don't like a game where that sort of becomes required. And I also want to make it clear that at some point I did wimp out and just say, alright, I'm going to turn it down to easy difficulty just because I just want to get through the rest of the game, the last few hours left, without getting frustrated. And, you know, even turning it down to easy did not solve it, as you can see from this clip. This clip is me playing on easy. And on top of all of that, again, like, you are faced with the fact that because difficulty of everything in the game scales to your level, that just means there's no point in going off somewhere else to grind, like you might do in a regular RPG. It's just like, oh, well, great. There's nothing I can do about it except continue to play through this segment. There's no incentive to go level up or anything like that. Maybe there's an incentive to go try and find a better gun, I guess. Like, that's the main thing. I also did have a minor issue, or I would say that I got a legendary gun at some point, like midway through the game, and it was so powerful relative to, you know, just like where I was at that time, that it was probably the best gun that I had for a solid a third of the game after that, which, you know, I mean, it's good to get a fun gun, it's good to get a powerful gun, but it's bad to get a gun that's so overpowered that that's the only gun that you want to use. It was like, alright, well, there's no point in using any of the other guns for any of the other situations I would normally use it in, because I got this one gun that was so overpowered that there's no point in using anything else. I don't think that feels fun either. Anyway, so yeah, I think that there's some issues with the itemization, the difficulty. I think that obviously the plot kind of sucks. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's kind of boring. Fine. I think the moment-to-moment gameplay is good. If you're just looking for, you know, a fun shooting game and, you know, maybe you want to play with your friends, awesome, go ahead. If it's something where, I don't know, like you were a previous fan of the Borderlands series or something like that, you might be a little bit mixed on this, because I don't know, it's a little bit too different in some ways, and at the same time it's also very similar in others. I don't know. It's a video game. It's fine. It's not great. It's not awful. I would say that it's certainly not the best in the series, but I don't know. It's not a bad video game. It's just not good. Anyway, so that is all that I have for today's video. As always, don't hesitate to like, comment, subscribe, smash that notification bell. Let me know down below what you'd like to see in future videos. Call me a scrub who can't handle the heat. tell me that I suck and that I'm just bad at Borderlands or whatever you want to do. I'll talk to you all next time. Have a good one.